So just because someone's high functioning, they're pushing themselves, they're overworking themselves, right, doesn't mean that this is, healthy, right? We got to take into consideration that we definitely do need what? Balance, right? There has to be some type of compromise. You got to be able to kind of give and take, right? Something has to give, right? If you're overworking yourself, yes, you're going to benefiting in resources, you're probably getting more money, etc., right? But it's harming your what? Your body, your mental, and your health, right? So we have to understand, like I said, there needs to be a balance, right? So just because someone is high functioning doesn't mean that they're, like I said, they're not struggling, right? So they could be looking like everything's good on the exterior, things are fine, but like I said, the internal, the body's screaming. The body needs some type of support because it needs a what? It needs rest, it needs comfort, it needs balance, right? So in regards to normalizing, reducing some shame, right? So many people learn to keep performing while emotionally overwhelmed, whether it's success, productivity, or responsibility. Like I said, hide that exhaustion by just trying to keep their stature in that frame, right? But people often praise coping mechanisms that are quietly harmful, right? So like I said, they may be, like I said, doing like sipping on that coffee, getting that little quick boost of energy, right? But at the same time too, these little mechanisms that they're doing, it's giving you the duration to keep going, right? But at the same time too, you're high functioning in that sense, but at the same time too, it's not healthy. It's not healthy to keep pushing yourself that way, right? So everybody's situation is going to be different. You may have someone that is, in a situation where they may not have a significant other in a situation, they have kids and they're trying to push, so they're able to maintain and stuff like that. I understand that, but this is why it's really important to understand that support, but we also got to be critical in our decision making, right? I got to keep it, call it how I see it, because this causes that exhaustion. This causes the sickness, right? This causes dysfunction in our lives, right? But we got to take into consideration that enough needs to be enough. And like I said, we need to have a compromise of balance, right? Looking for things that are going to be more comfortable for us to be able to maintain in our lives, right? So when it comes to psychoeducation, high functioning anxiety, burnout, depression, even trauma often goes unnoticed, right? So people out here just based on of their childhood, based off their upbringing, their situation, they can have just been pushing all their life, been working since you were 16, 14, 13, whatever, etc. And you're just used to doing what you're doing, right? But you also got to be able to, like I said, reassess what's going on, right? I've been doing this for how long, right? My back, my legs, my limbs, it's different now. I can't move like I'm in my 20s, etc. Right? So everybody's body is different, things are different, but that's why I really advocate for what? The journal, so you're able to have that self-awareness, to be able to know what's really going on by building that rapport with yourself, right? So some people cope by working themselves, overachieving themselves, pushing, right? You got to realize, like, you could have came from a parent or a household where it was excellence and high expectations was put upon you, so you're in that, you're breeding that type of stuff, right? But you got to also understand, like I said too, what does that do to your feelings? What does that do to your body? What does that do to your mental by having the expectations and overachieving, pushing yourself to a high degree, right? Or staying